Stories. We have all been impressed, inspired, motivated, and influenced by stories. We heard them, we cherished them, we learned from them. From Cinderella to Superman, Jurassic Park to Avengers, from TV serials to Netflix, and from blogging to presentations at work. Everything involves storytelling. And when you try to convey your thoughts with a story, it makes more sense to people. We have Mr. Sajwani, HR consultant here with us, and Ms. Azra, a storyteller and an influencer. We all believe that storytelling has a huge impact on people, whether it's business, blogging, work, or home. So, talking about stories, what is storytelling to you as an HR, Mr. Sajwani?
Assalamu alaikum, Wajiha and Azra. Thanks for connecting once again on your show. I think it's always a pleasure to be on your show. Storytelling as an HR person, I would say that organizations, to be precise, are stories in themselves. When you work for an organization, when you visit them, I have seen organizations that take pride in displaying or showcasing their past. How did they grow? How did they grow? How did they reach to this level? I mean, their older logo, their number of employees in the first year, till even if they are 30 years old, they dedicate a wall in the organizations. Some organizations in this very country, in Pakistan, I have seen that. And they take so much pride for the younger people, particularly the new entrants who come and join the organizations. They take them while taking the round of the building or the premises or the company overall. They stop by to that wall and show them, see, where were we 30 years from now and where are we today? And in this very process, I have seen people who have been with that company for 30 old years. And they see that they could see the first day and being the employee number 1 or employee number 5 and to this stage. To this, to me, to be precise, that organizations, be it small, medium, or large, they all have histories, and organizations must, and employees as well, must take pride in showcasing that and understanding and being proud of. When you say that how storytelling is taken by a HR and training profession, I think as we go by in a short while, we will address that. But to be precise, this very process is very interesting when it comes to training particularly. We are not talking of the young, high-tech, 20 plus years, 25 plus years, young fellows who attend the trainings. There is an older lot as well, of my age, a little younger, a little older. They take pride and they really feel great when stories are narrated which are relevant to the organizations, and they want to understand that they do connect with the stories. As we go by today, I will speak about some of the stories that we narrate in the orientation sessions that are so brilliant. They really click with the modern day as well as with the organizations overall. Over to you, Wajiha.
Perfect. That was a beautiful answer. And I think I would like to ask Azra the same question. Azra, what is storytelling to you as an influencer or a storyteller? Please elaborate.
Acha, on the onset, thank you so much, Sajwani Saab, Wajiha. It's an honor to be here with you guys and sharing such an important aspect in today's world. It's storytelling has recently become a buzzword. You hear everyone wants to categorize themselves as a storyteller. So they're either influencers, they're community builders, they're networkers, or they're storytellers. These are the 4 tags I use for myself also, right? But the reason I use those tags is because I have seen those tags to actually actually reflect on what I have done and reflect parts of my personality. That is the reason I use those 4 tags with me. Now, when I talk about storytelling, and I made a commitment to everybody on my Facebook that I will talk about it in terms of personal branding, and obviously I'm going to talk a little in terms of marketing and corporate communication because those are my strengths. I'm not an HROD person. I will let Sajwani Saab do those details. So stories are as old as the human being themselves. Okay, cavemen stories. You've seen, cavemen, they used to, gather around. They wouldn't be able to talk, but they would actually use those use maybe trees or twigs or whatever they had in terms of their ornaments, or in terms of what you would call their weapons that they had, or the daggers or whatever, to kill animals, slaughter, eat them, whatever. So these were depictions of real stories, right? And the reason stories are important from the point of view of being or influencing people is because these stories actually make an emotional connect. The only reason a story will influence is because you have been able to dot all the i's and you have been able to make that emotional connect. uh, Self knowledge, awareness, these are the two most, when I talk about having importance of how do you make an emotional connect. You only make an emotional connect if you with another person, not by knowing the other person, but by being aware of yourself first. If you have your self knowledge and if you have your self awareness, then your words will automatically flow into a story. So the idea is to know yourself, uh, know about yourself and know yourself very well, and then, like I said, weave those words into magic. And how do you weave those words into magic? There is no magic until and unless you're able to actually transform that carriage in that pumpkin into a carriage. So that wand is basically the words that you weave magic with, and that only influences if you're able to make an emotional connect. Yes, Vijaya.
Perfect. So आप दोनों के answers के बाद actually I came to this, being an NLP practitioner, a life coach, I focus a lot on language. And what in my opinion and my knowledge, what makes stories so effective or we connect to stories is because our brain is more receptive to language. So our auditory cortex of our brain is actually very much aware, and it's that region that receives language. It activates that. So stories, because we have been listening to stories since our childhood, we are always ready to learn through stories. It has an impact on us, and that's how we actually, get connected to it. Because हमने कहीं बचपन में दादी अम्मी से story सुनी होती है, कहीं अम्मी से, कहीं अब्बू से, and it has a connection, it has a bond. और वही सब चीजें जो जब हम उसके अंदर अपना personal touch देते हैं, like with emotions or with, as you said, के magic wand use करते हैं अपनी and all that. So it makes a connection with the audience.
True.
Right. So my next question is, what is storytelling to you? No, sorry, this one. Okay. So why do storytellers tell stories? Mr. Sajwani, would you like to elaborate this one?
Why do storytellers tell stories? I think as we all say on a lighter note, everyone has a job, and storytellers have a job too. True, and that's true. Why they tell stories. But I think storytelling is such a fun, as you very rightly said, Azra, bedtime stories, and you said that Dadi Amma Wali stories. I mean, we really, when I was preparing for this show, it really, I had to go to my memory lane. And since I haven't been able to see my Dadi Amma or Nani Amma as such, because they passed away before my arrival in this on this earth. But I remember my mom, my dad. I mean, they used to do that in my childhood, and I still register some of the stories, and I just can't forget them. So there is something they. I mean, I remember as you, जिस तरह गांव में होता है कि कुछ लोग बैठ के, जिस तरह आपने केवमैन की स्टोरीज की बात की, इस तरह गांव
Yes.
में भी यानी एक खुले आसमान के तहत के नीचे चारपाई के ऊपर बैठकर जो स्टोरीज का एक हमने, खैर आई कम फ्रॉम अ विलेज एंड आई रिमेम्बर एग्जैक्टली हाउ डू दे डू दिस, सो इट्स फन। आई मीन, खास तौर पे जो राह चलते लोग हैं वो खड़े हो जाते हैं, दे get engaged to that at times monologue, because it's just one way communication, but people get engrossed to it and they pay attention, leaving their वो what the कि किस काम से वो निकल रहे थे, लेकिन वहां खड़े होके वो ऐसा लगता है किसी मदारी का शो हो रहा है और लोग जो है वो दिलचस्पी के साथ वो सुन रहे हैं। That's very interesting, and I personally feel that storytellers have a lot of message, and they have a lot of relevance. That's why this trade or this profession has never died down since the man has been sent to this earth.
Yeah.
Over to Azra if she wants to add as a professional on this subject.
So, like you firstly pointed out, storytellers today tell stories because it is a profession. That is where their bread and butter is coming from. Look at
True.
Pixar, or for example, look at the Disney mug. I always have a Disney mug. I'm a very story fan, actually. So I use this mug all the time, even when I have to give marketing examples. So storytellers tell a story because of Vajia, your first question. How do stories influence? So
Influencer.
stories actually are influential. That is the reason, apart from the fact that Pixar, yeah, Marvel heroes, or all of those are making movies, creating stories. Simba, Lion King, they're creating stories not because, one, obviously it's their profession, it's their bread and butter, but generically, even if we don't know that, all of us are storytellers. See, you used example of the village, वो जो village पे चारपाई वाली और evening gatherings होती थी. I talked about the caveman times. But talked about grandparents, dadis and nannies and everybody, and parents reading out bedtime stories to you. All of us are storytellers, and the only reason we tell stories is because that is the most powerful tool. Even from a point of NLP coach, Vidya, it's the most powerful tool of connecting with any other human being. That's the reason we tell stories.
Yes, you're so right. And stories, actually, in my point of view, as an NLP practitioner, as a kindergarten teacher as well, stories are actually, recognizable patterns. And in those patterns, actually, we find meaning. So it's, it's abstract to concrete. So when we create that abstract thing and put it in a story, it makes that concrete presence in front of a child or a human being. So it actually brings, all your imaginations to concrete substance.
Yes.
All right. So here we go with our next question. What is effective storytelling, and what makes storytelling so effective for learning? Mr. Sajwani.
What is effective storytelling? That is the relevance to me. You can't narrate a story or tell a story which is not relevant to the organizational context where we are coming from. So I can't narrate a story of a movie of Amitabh Bachchan when it has nothing to do with that subject or the topic that we are discussing in a training. Yes, I mean, I have shared stories of Munabai, both the Munabai movies in my, and recently I was watching a movie, Aankhein of Amitabh Bachchan. Which really reminded me that what a disgruntled employee can go to an extent that he, I mean, makes a bank robbery plan. So we need to be very careful how we are dealing with our employees. That was the message. So my concern is that storytelling in the learning and development, and this is one of the movies that we should be showing to the line managers, to the senior managers in the organization, because they need to take good care of their employees. You can't. I mean, why this movie happened? Because a senior most banker was fired because of his temperament,
Mm-hmm.
and he wanted to take a revenge, and that's why he robbed the bank. So see the relevance, and these are the things that we carry in our employee movies. For example, I mentioned two movies of Munabai. We took messages from there, and we connect. And likewise other stories, for example, Somerset Maugham, a great author of his time, who wrote several good books. He comes up with a wonderful story that uh, one master went to his servant, and he said, "You've served me for so long, and I want you to do one more last favor to me, because you are about to retire or you leave us. So do me a favor, build a similar house, which is my current house, and next year when I'll come, I will see that house." I mean, the employee was really pissed off, and he said, "Oh, yet another task before I'm leaving." So half-heartedly, he built that house. And when next year the master came, and he visited the house, and while leaving the house, he handed over keys to that servant. He said, "This is for you." The message we want to communicate in our trainings is so immense and so meaningful, that if you take care of your organization, or if you take care of your tasks, your jobs, your departments, as if you were the owner, how would you take care of that? If you don't take care of that, this is going to be your inam at the end of the day. So what I need to understand here, and we as audiences, and our colleagues, Wajiha and Azra, both of you, that we are, I mean, we need to create this sense of awareness and feeling that we are owners of what we do. We are not doing a simple job to make money, or we are not employed by somebody. That's why we are doing our work. So these kind of messages that we share in our through stories, and create ownership at the workplace. Over to you.
All right. I would like to thank you, everyone who's watching, and you can write your comments in. You can tell us about your favorite stories or any stories that have inspired you in your comments, and we will love to share them here. So, Azra, according to you, what is effective storytelling, and what makes storytelling so effective for learning?
Okay, so a story, like I first said, a story is actually a reflection of your own self-awareness and knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But typically, the way, if I look at it from a corporate communication, yeah, from a marketing perspective also, so what is actually a story? A story is an idea which you put in a message format. Now, how do you do that? You do it either through creating a visual, you do it either through verbal, or you do it through written content. There are three ways to do it, right? And I'll tell you something very interesting also. So there is a short sentence I picked up from an expert, and he's Anthony DeMello, and he said the shortest distance between a human brain and truth is story. So what connects most to any human being is a story. And what is a story? Story is nothing but it is an idea that you put in a message format. Now, how do you actually make that effective, and how do you make it effective for learning, or how do you make it effective for even putting it up as a personal brand for yourself, right? So what I tend to do is there's something I recently picked up, and that was videos. And thank you, Vijaya, for saying, well, a video would be more important. And then I realized, see, let me give you a live example from yesterday, Vijaya. So I put in the version that you recorded, in which all of us three were there. I put it on my Instagram, and if you compare, and then within 20 minutes, I realized that the emotional connect my audience has with me is different than they will have with Vijaya.
Yes,
I put up that video of those 40 seconds in which I was talking at least an hour later from the moment I put up your video. And if you notice, my video already had 208 views, while the one I put up with you three. So what counts was the visual
the connection.
in which, yes, the emotional connect of having me there, because all of my target market associates with me. So that is an emotional connect that you have, right? Secondly, because I'm very big on creative writing, I picked up words which were like, bedtime stories. I picked up folklore. I put up words like fun. I picked up words like magics and wands. So when you have effectiveness in storytelling, one, what stands out is visual in today's world. That's what I've seen, right? And the second thing that probably stands out is conversation. No one wants to know hardcore facts on how many people actually benefited out of this product of service, right? But the moment you say, that was a yum experience, okay? Just the words of saying yum experience, and the voice that your voice, how people connect to your voice.
Intonation, yes.
Yes, right. That's the first thing you talked about, Wajiha, when we opened this discussion, right? So this is how you realize that what makes storytelling effective is visualization, and how people actually relate to visual. And that is the reason I used an example from yesterday. And then obviously, Sajwani Saab, we all cross-shared that post, and together we were able to create more than 700 views for it, right?
Yeah.
So there was Sajwani Saab's followership, there's my followership, there's your followership, right? And it had double impact because we kept reinforcing the message. But the moment, and that is a very small story that we're taking. Hamari story kya thi? Come attend a storytelling session. We could have done it in a very bored fashion, right? But we all three put up our strengths together.
Perceptions,
okay. Yeah. Yes. We put up our strengths together, and we knew what was targeting and where we were able to generate most leads. That's what personal branding and marketing about. So effective storytelling and effective learning will only come not with some boring PowerPoint presentations and infographics. I know they're important. I know they're very, very important. I am a teacher. I've been a teacher, so I know how important they are. But even when I taught, and one of my students wrote back to me, said, ha ha, and she put up a lol sign, and she said, oh my God, we're going to remember all those lovely stories from your Zabis times. So that is the strength of effective storytelling. People remember you. People remember you.
So true. Being a kindergarten teacher, as well as my experience, Azra and Mr. Sajwani, what I have been always teaching children with, hands-on experiences. So what I used to do is, we put up a story, and if let's say we have to teach what happens in a market or a supermarket, we'll put up a story, we'll set up a market area. So role-playing, and telling children everything through stories actually makes sense to them. So what if I start something with like, oh, what happened yesterday when Miss Wajiha went to the supermarket? So children immediately were like, okay, Miss Wajiha has something to tell about herself, and then it connects. So they are, and then this intonation, you make it like, oh wow, it's a surprising story, or oh, it's a sad story. So all this intonation with your stories, with your videos, with your influencing tactics, it all matters. So if there is emotion, intonation, language used appropriately, it connects.
So Wajiha, let me just,
yes, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. So when you took an example of your students, or maybe when Sajwani Saab talks about the trainees who come into his program, corporate trainees, young graduates, or even middle management or senior management, then you probably by now with your experience have realized that your personality is actually born out of stories. So your students and your trainees actually associate you with a personality, and that personality has got to do with some sort of a story that they can immediately. The moment there is a story and they say, oh my God, Miss Wajiha, and they say, oh my God, Sajwani Saab, that's, so personalities are actually born out of stories. Hence personal branding for stories.
So very true. So very true. Right. This is. I mean, I can recall where are you coming from, but this is fact. This happens.
Yeah.
All right. So I have 2 comments here. Reema Khan has joined. She's saying, I remember seeing 12 Angry Men. It was so inspiring.
Oh, it is. It is. It is.
Yes, Reema, we agreed to you. And Mr. Mamoon Rafiq has also joined. Thank you for joining in. We are glad to see you here. So let's go to our next question. Our next question is, how can stories be powerful? So we are talking about stories. We are telling a lot how stories connect to people. But for those people who actually don't know or not have too much experience of, telling stories, how can they make their stories powerful? And what are the advantages of storytelling? If you can emphasize on that, Azra.
Okay. Oh, you want me to start here? Okay. I thought मैं notes बना लूंगी जब तक Sajwani
No
साहब
issues if you
But
want
no,
Mr.
no, no.
Sajwani to continue.
Oh,
Okay,
either.
perfect.
I don't mind. Sajwani sir, would you like to go straight because
No,
I
no, no,
wanted to pick
please,
up
please.
Okay. So what makes stories powerful? Okay. Remember, Vajia, when we and Sajwani sir, when we were in school and we were taught to write essays, हमें सिखाया जाता था. So there's got to be an introduction, there's got to be a body, and there's got to be a conclusion, right? A story follows exactly the same format. There's nothing different. Okay. So how do you make stories powerful? And Vajia, you just used an example. Okay, when you use that intonation, what was the word that you used? I'm sorry.
Intonation.
Okay. So there is an expression of happiness, there's an expression of sorrow, there is peace, there is sadness, right? And people relate to all these emotions, and they relate to all those वो fancy मतलब कि आप faces बनाते हो or whatever type of thing, right? So what makes a story very, very powerful is, one, the story is expected to be unexpected. If you have a story which everyone knows इसका end क्या होगा, it's not a story. Okay, number one. So there's got to be an element of surprise and unexpectations. Hopefully that surprise by the end of the story comes out as a positive or something that gives you energy. So stories actually are like there's this guy Patel who's great with personal branding and who's great with corporate communication, and he says stories are like vitamins. Now, what do vitamins do? When you start having vitamins, they start building up your immunity, and they put all objections to bay. They push the objections away, and they make you adapt, or they make you vulnerable. I wouldn't say vulnerable is more of a negative word over here, but it makes you, the stories make you inclined towards listening to, or towards talking about, or towards being soft towards a product or towards a person themselves, right? So when I use stories, one is because I know chapters and chapters of marketing or communication or mathematics are boring. Okay. Sorry, with all due apologies, chapter of HR and OD and learning are also boring, right? How do we actually get people to remember them? And Sajwani sab ne abhi example use kiya. He uses a lot of Amitabh Bachchan movie examples, and he uses Munna Bhai examples. So in my training sessions, when I used to do training sessions with the corporates, मैं हमेशा कहती थी, oh my god, 4 to 5 half day training, 4 hours, 8 hours की training, full hours. By the end of the day, if they're able to take back even 20% of what I've done for them, my job is done. I would feel nice. But I will tell you something else. What they would remember is not your PowerPoint. What they would remember are not your anecdotes. What they would remember is not the notes that you write. Compared to PowerPoints and compared to handwriting, my feeler is, okay, there is a PowerPoint, but whenever I have a flip chart and I write notes then and there, they remember it more. My trainees will remember it more. But what they remember is, oh my God, guys, do you remember? We had this trainer, Azra Maqsood. She came in, and do you remember what story jo wo narrate kar rahi thi about the success of somebody who did it, who made it on top? And when she was talking about this, she was actually talking about organization transformation. That's how stories become powerful, and that's how they become relevant. If I can relate a situation to some boring text, to some theories, to physics, okay? So if I were to make physics interesting, I would make Stephen Hawking a compulsory reading. He makes physics so interesting, right? Why? Because he has a knack for telling those stories. Out of all physics algorithms, okay, out of all your boring definitions and your boring theories and all, right? So stories for me only become powerful and they only become effective when that story is related to a situation I want people to learn and remember. Otherwise मेरी story telling बकवास है. It is just a नानी की story which I remember क्योंकि बचपन में memory बेहतर होती थी.
All right. Okay. So over to you, Mr. Sajwani, I think.
I think she said it all and so impressively. मैं मजाक किरकिरा नहीं करना चाह रहा. जो उन्होंने बोला है exactly. I mean, let's move on. Particularly,
All right.
my takeaway is it is vitamins.
Oh, wow.
आपको आपकी बॉडी को आपके ज़हन को जितनी एनर्जी मिलती है एक अच्छी स्टोरी सुन के और द वे इट इज टोल्ड, आई मीन उसका कोई जवाब नहीं है. जी वजिया.
परफेक्ट, सही, ठीक, सही, बिल्कुल. आपने अज़रा और मैं आपसे कनेक्ट करती हूँ इस बात पे कि यू नो जब हम स्टोरीज बता रहे होते हैं हमें थोड़ा सा मैं इसके अंदर ऐड करना चाहूंगी कल्चरल अंडरस्टैंडिंग. जैसे लेट्स से कि मैं आई वाज डूइंग अ सेशन फ्यू डेज बैक और उसमें वी वर डूइंग इट फॉर पाकिस्तानीज ओनली और वहाँ पे जो लोग थे, अगर मैं इंग्लिश में बोल रही थी तो मुझे किसी ने कहा कि आप जब पाकिस्तान के लिए कर रही हैं तो उर्दू में करें. मैंने कहा जी बिल्कुल ठीक कह रहे हैं आप, मुझे उर्दू में करना चाहिए. तो इस तरह आपकी बात ज्यादा लोगों तक पहुंचेगी. तो मैं यहाँ पे ये कोट इसलिए कर रही हूँ कि जब हम लोग स्टोरी टेलिंग भी करते हैं तो वी शुड बी यू नो इन आवर लैंग्वेज इतना सेलेक्टिव हमें होना चाहिए कि हम जिस ऑडियंस को कनेक्ट करना चाह रहे हैं वो ऑडियंस उससे कनेक्ट हो. और एज यू सेड क्यूरियोसिटी और इमेजिनेशन और कम्युनिकेशन वो जरूर होना चाहिए उसके अंदर. तो लेट्स मूव ऑन. I think let's talk about how can we master storytelling. If you can elaborate this one, Mr. Sajwani.
How do we master storytelling? In fact, मेरे ज़हन में था कि आप मुझसे अब अगला सवाल करेंगी रिगार्डिंग, हाँ लेकिन चूंकि स्टोरी टेलिंग में मेनली अज़रा का सब्जेक्ट है, मैं तो ट्रेनिंग पर्सपेक्टिव से इस पर आ रहा हूँ.
चले ठीक है, फिर आप मुझे ये बताएं, फिर आप मुझे ये बताएं. नहीं, मेरे ख्याल में आप मिस्टर सजवानी फिर ये बताएं. आई वांटेड द ऑडियंस टू नो एज वेल कि ये कोई बहुत हम स्क्रिप्टेड शो नहीं कर रहे हैं, हमारा जनरल डिस्कशन है. तो फिर आप मुझे ये बताएं कि आपकी कोई एक बचपन की ऐसी स्टोरी जो आपको याद हो आज तक और उसका बड़ा इंस्पिरेशनल या इन्फ्लुएंस हो आपके ऊपर, कोई ऐसी स्टोरी आपको याद है अपने बचपन से?
मेरे बचपन में मेरी वालदा जो मुझे सुनाया करती थी कि वो जो अक्सर रसूल सल्लम की जो एक स्टोरी का एक हदीस है या फिर वो वाक़या है हज़रत सल्लम का कि एक वालदा जो है वो अपने बेटे की शिकायत करने जाती हैं कि मेरा बेटा बहुत मीठा खाता है. तो हज़रत सल्लम ने फरमाया कि तुम कल आना. तो वो कल जो है वो दोबारा वालदा उनको लेकर गई और वो फिर उन्होंने कहा हज़रत सल्लम ने कि आप कल आइएगा प्लीज,
कल आइएगा.
और फिर जो है वो अगले दिन फिर गई और उसको बच्चे को उन्होंने कहा कि फरमाया कि आप बेटा ज्यादा मीठा खाना अच्छी बात नहीं है. तो वालदा परेशान हो गई कि या रसूलुल्लाह आप ये बात 2 दिन पहले कह सकते थे, मतलब खामखा का फेरा लगा दिया आपने मुझे. तो उन्होंने कहा कि मैंने चूंकि 2 दिन खुद मीठा खाया था इसलिए मैं नहीं कहना चाहता था आपके बेटे को, उस पर इसका असर नहीं होता. तो ये स्टोरी मेरी जहन में जो एक तो देखिए प्रैक्टिस व्हाट यू प्रीच, और दूसरी बात ये कि रसूल का किरदार, और दूसरा मैसेज कि किस तरह से जो है वो हमें कम्युनिकेट करना है, वो मेरे जहन में नक्श हो गया. और मैं हमेशा बचपन में, क्योंकि मैं जाहिर है हर बच्चा मीठा बहुत पसंद करता है और बहुत शौक से खाता है, तो मेरे जहन में भी ये था कि मैं जो हूँ वो किस तरह जो है वो इसको कम करूं मैं. और मेरी वालदा जो है वो मुझे बार बार ये जो स्टोरी सुना के मुझे याद दिलाया करती थी. देखिए रसूलुल्लाह का भी इरशाद था कि नहीं खाना चाहिए ज्यादा मीठा. तो दिस इज समथिंग दैट इज रजिस्टर्ड समहाउ इन माय माइंड. और आज आई टेल दिस टू माय किड्स कि बहुत ज्यादा मीठा जो है वो, और आप प्रूवन है. अब मेरी बड़ी बेटी जिसके यहाँ एक माशाल्लाह बेटा भी है, अब तो खैर वो बहुत छोटा है, लेकिन स्टिल शी इज केयरफुल कि जी उसको इतनी छोटी एज में, वो अब आई थी हमारे पास पाकिस्तान रिसेंटली, तो वो एक छोटा सा ब्रश, मतलब 1 साल का बच्चा जो है वो ब्रश कर रहा है, और वो भी बाहर से जो है वो खूबसूरत सा कार्टून वाला ब्रश जो है वो लेकर आई. तो दिस इज समथिंग विच इज अमेजिंग कि जी लोगों को जो इस उम्र में आप प्रैक्टिस कराते हैं। तो इन नटशेल ये एक मेरी छोटी स्टोरी है जो कि मेरे जहन पर नक्श है हमेशा से बचपन से, और जो हज़रत सल्लम की ये शक्कर खाने या मीठा खाने वाली जो आदत है। ओवर टू यू वजिया।
Perfect. I will take this comment. मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा. I believe Ray's comment. I believe it's a game of emotions. In any way, if you connect to a person through emotions, be it laughter, grief, happiness, the emotional roller coaster that stories do, it sustains and becomes nostalgic, just like magic. So
Music.
very well said, Ray. Yes. And Mr. Mamoon Rafiq is saying storytelling is the best and influential part of the training. It stays in minds for longer time and easy to recall. As you said as well. Yeah. Okay, so Azra, over to you. How do we master storytelling? But before that, I would like to know your favorite story from your childhood.
So I'm a born romantic, and I've always liked Cinderella's. And there was a time, because my mom was very strict in the sense कि लड़कियों को सारे काम बचपन से करने चाहिए, and you should get used to it. And because Wajiha, I grew up in the Middle East, there was not a lot of domestic support, and we were like 5 siblings, so we were used to do. We made sure we all did our work, right? So I used to ask my dad कि ये stepmom है क्या? क्योंकि Cinderella बहुत पढ़ते थे, and कि इतने काम करवाती हैं ये, और कहती है स्कूल में टॉप 3 में भी आना है, और कुरान शरीफ की क्लासेस भी हो रही है, बट घर के काम भी आने चाहिए बच्चों को करने. And my mom was never कि it's a girl or a boy, मतलब we tasks were divided. All of us would do help out mummy. So मैं हमेशा अपने अब्बू से कहती थी ये स्टेप मॉम है क्या? So I loved Cinderella, I loved Rapunzel, and I would love playing those characters. Oh my God, there's going to be this knight in the shining armor type of born romantic type के लोग होते. So those used to be fairy tales were my favorite anytime.
Cool.
Anytime.
तो आप इस पे रोशनी डालेंगे, how do we master storytelling?
अच्छा, okay. So there's something very, very interesting about storytelling. So one is a story. Storytelling या story delivery itself is a big art. ठीक है, बहुत अच्छी स्टोरी हो सकती है, मगर एक lousy storyteller अगर है तो there goes your story. Okay, so storytelling, when we say that person is a captivating storyteller. अगर हम किसी की story पढ़ रहे होते हैं, like Paulo Coelho, I find him to be amazing, very, very captivating, right? And then I find Khalil Gibran very captivating. Okay, so matlab 2 of the people I read very often, right? So their story is written content, right? But it is very captivating. You don't want to put the book down. Similarly, when you are listening to people, so what I'm trying to tell you over here is a story may be true and it may not be your story. It is perfectly okay. Writing में तो हम ये करते हैं ना कि अगर आप किसी का work use करें तो plagiarism में नहीं आ जाता है जब तक आप उसको proper credits ना दें, right? But in storytelling, you can pick up someone else's story, and then the people need to know how true is the story. ये बात मेरी याद रखें भैया, जो चीज सच्ची होती है ना वो आपके दिल से सच्ची निकलती है, and that is the authenticity people relate to. This is my experience of more than 40 years with with younger and middle tier management, even with seniors के साथ तो obviously, right? आपकी authenticity reflect कर रही होती है आपकी बातों से, आपकी presentation से, आपकी slide से, आपकी story से. So one, people need to know if the story is true. Two, if it is true, what impact is this leaving on the listeners or on the readers or the viewers? And number three, if it is true, is it your story or is it not your story? It does not matter if it's not your story. As long as it is true and you give those due credits. I'd like to give you a small example here. When Steve Jobs was making the iPod, it is that small device in which he wanted to put, like 20,000 and 50,000 songs maybe, right? And he said, now Apple products की beauty क्या होती थी? Everything has to be small. Everything has to be compact. ये Apple का एक school of thought था Steve Jobs का, right? So the first time his engineers came up with the iPod, right? And they said, there is no more space in it, you know. Steve Jobs looked at it and there was a fish tank in the room where this presentation was being made. He picked it up and he threw it in the water, right? और वो जैसे ही water में iPod गया, वो जैसे ही sink किया, उसमें से bubbles आने शुरू हो गए. He said, what are you telling me? There's no space in it anymore और आप इसको और compact नहीं कर सकते. इसमें से अगर bubbles निकल रहे हैं, that means there is space in here. Get rid of that space. I want it to be small, right? Whenever I use this story, you know, people will always remember it. Why? It is a true story. It is from an authentic source, which is Steve Jobs. Three, it is unexpected. It has a surprising end, right? Oh my God. You don't expect CEOs to function like that, but then the eccentric CEO tha. So if you want to master the art of storytelling, how do I do it, right? I am a storyteller, pedaishi. So how do I do it? I use a real story. I use an authentic story and I will give you quotes. I will give you like, अभी मैंने Anthony DeMello का आपको एक statement बताया, you know, the shortest distance between a human brain, you know, is basically your story. So your story has to be true. It can be fiction. That's perfectly okay. With fictions, you need to learn a lot of things and your delivery's got to be immaculate. With true stories, authenticity दिल से आ रही होती है आपके, and people relate. उल्लू नहीं है लोग. People will relate, and people, whenever I have used the, you know, a lot of people have come back to me and said, remember you were in that training seminar, and I'd say, oh my God, okay, I'm so sorry, I do so many trainings, I won't remember you. Oh, this is the one in which you were telling us the Steve Jobs story. So I'm like, oh my God, you know. So people will remember Azra Maqsood told us a story which was an iPod space ka story, right? So how do you master the art of storytelling? Use a true story, give it due credit whenever it is due, and use it in the right place. That's how you master the art of storytelling.
So true. And one more thing, it should be connected to your purpose when you are in presentations in any trainings and all. So we have a question after your message, Azra, and I think she's asking about that thing that when you said it should be true. What about imagination? It's not true, but it's in my imagination.
Perfectly okay. So most of these fiction writers that you go through and most of the fiction pieces that we use, wo kya hote hain? They are just imaginations. I think this is the first thing I said. Okay, what makes a strong story? A strong story comes from an idea. और वो idea क्या होता है? जो idea को आप message में किस तरह relay करते हैं, that is the idea. So when I read when I read Cecilia Ahern, maybe, which I don't read very often now, or, when you read Sidney Sheldon, जो कि सारे बचपन की books, सब नहीं पढ़ते हैं वो सारी books, right? Those are just imagination, figurative.
It was so famous.
I was about to say Imran series, yes.
Imran series, right? Secret Seven, Enid Blyton's favorite, the famous five. We grew up reading those stories in school, right? So those are all imaginative stories, right? It is not true. It is only so this is what I said. When I'm talking about storytelling from the perspective of personal branding, from marketing, I want to use real life stories which have happened in the corporate world. So maybe I should have just modified my statement and said, this is a real life story from a marketing world. This is a real life story from a CEO. Okay. So yes, your imagination brings up story. Oh, you tell me my story. Like, Wajiha, you've read my blogs. I use a lot of fiction in my blogs, right? So Ray Lalani, please, I'm not marketing myself, but if you read my pieces, which are on my WordPress, you will see it's a lot of imagination, but they are all inspired out of true stories.
True.
So हमारी imagination में भी कहाँ से आती हैं? Friends हो गए, families हो गए, entrepreneurs हो गए, different authors हो गए, इन्हीं से हम stories सुनते हैं, इन्हीं से हम stories इनकी पढ़ते हैं, इन्हीं की stories हमें सुनाई जाती हैं, right? So हमारी imagination में भी ना वहीं से कुछ चीजें build up हो रही होती हैं.
Yes.
So those are the self-knowledge, self-awareness, plus all of these things bring together from जो already हमारे experiences और हमारा education होता है. That's where our imagination comes in. Wajiha is an NLP coach and more of a psychologist, so she'll be able to answer this question better
मैं भी
than
यही
I
कहने
can.
वाली थी कि हमारी इमेजिनेशन भी हमारी परसेप्शंस पे बेस होती है। हम चीजों के बारे में जो कुछ भी जानते हैं वो या तो हमने कहीं से सुना होता है या देखा होता है या एक्सपीरियंस किया होता है, और उसी बेस पे हम इमेजिन करते हैं चीजें। और कभी कभी यस, इमेजिनेशन बहुत एग्जैजरेटेड भी होती है, बट इट इज ऑल बेस्ड ऑन योर रियल लाइफ एक्सपीरियंसेस, या वो सब कुछ जो आपने कहीं कहानियों में पढ़ा होता है, लाइक से अवेंजर्स या सुपरमैन, ये सब कुछ imaginary stories हैं. We have not seen them, but it has been inspired through something. किसी भी perception से, किसी भी चीज से ये inspired होती हैं, and then how you imagine. तो आई एम वेरी ग्लैड कि एक्चुअली बहुत सारे लोग देख रहे हैं और बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग कमेंट्स आ रहे हैं। तो देयर इज वन मोर कमेंट फ्रॉम हिना रिजवान, and she's saying storytelling can transfer a non-removable message. Can transfer non-removable messages, also encourages children to be creative and use their imagination to picture the setting, the characters, and the story as it unfolds, rather than being given the imagery to accompany the words, which is the case when watching a film. The child is able to build the world within which the story is set for themselves. That's so right, Hina. You're so right. And actually, when I talk about, teaching kindergarten students, I know what imagination levels, what understanding levels they have. We cannot even imagine like what, they are miracles. So हम लोग खुद शायद कहीं पे अपने education system से उनकी imagination को थोड़ा box कर देते हैं. Otherwise, if you don't provide them with a scene, they will create a scene. You give them, just an imagination and ask them to prepare something, they will do it. And it doesn't have to be right or wrong. It's just their imagination and we can encourage them that way. Azra, इस पे कुछ कहना चाहेंगी आप?
जी, I also want साजवानी साहब input here a little. बच्चों को जो आप imagination की हम बात कर रहे हैं ना, तो बहुत बड़े गुरु हैं आपके, which is Edward de Bono, और lateral thinking उनकी जो है बहुत ही popular paradigms है उनके। तो उन्होंने बच्चों के साथ बड़े एक्सपेरिमेंट्स किए, एंड ही गेव दीज सिचुएशंस टू चिल्ड्रन एंड टू स्पेशल पीपल, दो तरह के लोगों को। तो जो एक्चुअल हम जैसे नॉर्मल और एवरेज लोग जो प्रॉब्लम्स नहीं सॉल्व कर पाते थे या बड़े ट्रेडिशनल तरीकों से सॉल्व करते थे, बच्चों ने और स्पेशल नीड्स के जो लोग हैं उनकी लैटरल थिंकिंग बिल्कुल अलग है। आई एम श्योर साजवानी साहब हैज मोर कमेंट्स ऑन एडवर्ड डी बोनो एंड लैटरल थिंकिंग के पैराडाइम्स उनके।
I think move on. Let's move on the next questions, because we are continuously receiving comments and all this. So maybe some other time.
Okay. सजवानी जल्दी में लग रहे हैं आज मुझे आप। अच्छा,
नहीं।
ओके, तो एक और कमेंट आया मामून रफीक साहब का। ही सेइंग, एज फार एज माय एक्सपीरियंसेस, स्टोरी टेलिंग बेस्ट वर्क्स इन सेल्स ट्रेनिंग्स, द आउटकम्स आर ऑलवेज एक्स्ट्रा ऑर्डिनरी। ये तो कुछ मिस्टर सजवानी आपकी चॉइस का कमेंट आया, नहीं?
जी बिल्कुल, और मैं इस पर ये कमेंट करूंगा कि स्टोरी टेलिंग वर्क्स इन मेनी वेज। अगर आप जो हमारा एक क्वेश्चन जो है कि हम कहाँ पे कॉर्पोरेट सेक्टर में स्टोरी टेलिंग को यूज कर सकते हैं, तो आई कैन आंसर दिस क्वेश्चन नाउ, सो वी कैन कवर इट अप मे बी। फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल आई वुड से दैट in HR, we use storytelling in orientation, as I mentioned, that the wall example that was created, जिस तरह wall of fame कहें या wall of history कहें, इस तरह की चीजें जो हैं orientation में, where for example I remember one of the telecom companies where I worked, in the first year we were bombarded this notion that we are a 150-year-old company. And I said, how come? I mean, 150-year-old company, पता चला कि जिस मुल्क में वो कंपनी पैदा हुई थी वो उसको 150 साल हो गए हैं, और वो फिर पूरे ग्रुप की हिस्ट्री लेकर। So that's how we wanted to, that we are not a 5-year-old born, local born company. We are 150-year-old company, and so on and so forth. तो आपका ओरिएंटेशन में आपको इतना ज्यादा प्राउड एम्प्लॉई बनाया जाता है कि जिसमें आपको पूरी कंपनी की हिस्ट्री, कि कौन कौन से कंट्रीज में आप हैं, कौन कौन सी मार्केट्स में आप हैं, कौन कौन सी इमर्जिंग मार्केट्स में आप जा रहे हैं मजीद। सो ऑन बोर्डिंग और ओरिएंटेशन जिसको हम कहते हैं, तो उसमें सबसे पहले हम इसको यूज करते हैं। देन इन द सेल्स ट्रेनिंग, एज मामून जस्ट मेंशन्ड, प्रोडक्ट को आप रिलेट करते हैं अपनी लोकल मार्केट के साथ, उसकी स्टोरीज बहुत सारी हम जो है वो डेवलप करते हैं और कर सकते हैं। देन देयर इज अनदर क्वेश्चन, देयर इज अनदर डायमेंशन टू इट, प्रोडक्ट ट्रेनिंग। फॉर एग्जांपल हम जो इसको कहते हैं कि मोबाइल मनी जब पाकिस्तान में नया नया आया था, तो काफी खदशात थे कि कैसे चलेगा यहाँ पर। उसमें भी फ्रॉड्स हुए बहुत सारे, लेकिन वी लर्न आवर लेसन्स ओवर टाइम। सो बहुत सारी चीजें हैं जिसको हम लेकर चलते हैं प्रोडक्ट्स के साथ। कोई भी प्रोडक्ट हो सकती है। फॉर एग्जांपल मैं आपको मिसाल दूं कि प्रीपेड, पहले तो एक जमाने में, सिंस आई कम फ्रॉम टेलीकॉम, तो बहुत सारी मेरी एग्जांपल्स जो है वो टेलीकॉम से होती हैं अक्सर बेशतर। तो उसमें एक था कि एक जमाने में सिर्फ शनाख्ती कार्ड की जो है वो CNIC की ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट फोटो कॉपी देकर आप जो है वो मोबाइल फोन खरीद सकते थे। नो बार कोडिंग या दूसरी जो चीजें हैं, आपके थंब इम्प्रेशंस या नादरा से कनेक्शन, कुछ भी नहीं। तो we remember that we had this issue, but the market and the product developed itself to an extent कि जब हम अब ट्रेनिंग्स में जाते हैं तो we narrate those stories, किस तरह से we have learned our lessons in this market. Even not only Pakistan but the Southeast Asian countries, बहुत सारों में ये मसला रहा। फिर हम प्रोडक्ट के बाद हम एप्लीकेशन ट्रेनिंग्स की बात करते हैं, और लास्टली अगर हम बात करें तो लाइफ स्किल्स। इन सारी चीजों में हम स्टोरीज जो है वो, लाइफ स्किल ट्रेनिंग में बहुत सारी गुंजाइश होती है कि जिसमें हम रिस्ट्रिक्ट नहीं होते प्रोडक्ट्स या IT की ट्रेनिंग के हवाले से या आपकी एप्लीकेशन ट्रेनिंग के हवाले से। बट हियर वी आर लिटिल, हमारा हाथ खुला होता है लाइफ स्किल्स में, जिसमें हम जो है वो खुलकर बहुत सारी, जिस तरह अपनी हमारी कॉलीग ने भी बताया, अजरा ने, तो हम काफी उसका इस्तेमाल करते हैं कि हम जो है वो हर, और खास तौर पर मैंने कहा कि चूंकि बाज दफा में गैप नजर आता है, एम्प्लॉइज की एजेस में भी वेरिएशन होता है, तो हमें कैप्टिवेट रखने के लिए चंद एक स्टोरीज जो है वो मेंशन करनी पड़ती हैं, जिसमें सीनियर हमारे जो कॉलीग्स हैं वो भी इंटरेस्ट ले सकें। जी वजिया।
बिल्कुल सही। आई टोटली अग्री के एक क्वेश्चन हमें आया है, एक्चुअली मैं वो आपसे जरा पूछ लूं। समवन वाज आस्किंग के please give an example related to branding in food, if you can provide an example, like how can they brand in food.
Let me take that up.
Okay, please.
Okay. So Rida, have you seen television commercials जो आते हैं, उसके अंदर कनौर का एक नया वो आया था, फॉर्मूला आया था, या कनौर का एक नया रेसिपी या एक नया टेस्ट आया था, which was about chilies, okay, tomatoes and chilies दोनों का, right? So animated उसका advertisement बनाया और उस एनिमेशन में दिखाया बच्चे बैठे हुए टेबल पे, they're getting bored, they're hungry, but उन्हें रेगुलर कोई चीज खाना नहीं है। So दिखाते हैं कि वो क्या होता है, दो कैरेक्टर्स पॉप अप करते हैं अचानक से, एंड वन कैरेक्टर इज अ हरी मिर्च एंड द अदर इज अ टमेटो या समथिंग, राइट? तो वो दो कैरेक्टर्स पॉप अप करते हैं, और वो कैरेक्टर्स जब आते हैं तो वर्लिंग होती है, एनर्जी आती है, वो जो चिकन नूडल्स का जो बोल होता है उसमें से स्टीम आनी शुरू हो जाती है, यू नो। सो वो जो विजुअल है, अगर आप और मैं देखें, नॉट जस्ट द बच्चास, आप और मैं देखें, जब स्टीमिंग बोल आपको नजर आता है of noodles, it makes you hungry also, right? और ये स्टोरी है जो आपकी रिलेट करती है कार्टून कैरेक्टर्स के साथ, जो है एनिमेटेड कैरेक्टर्स के साथ आपने क्या किया, आपने हरी मिर्च का एक कैरेक्टर बना दिया, which means this is a new flavor जिसमें आपकी मिर्ची भी है, it was चटखारा or something, which this is bad for the brand कि I don't remember the brand name, right? Branding की
No,
बुराई,
we are not branding
I don't
here.
remember. Yes, but I'm just telling you from a marketing perspective, if I were that company, I'd be really offended कि इसको ad याद है, इसको brand याद नहीं है, right? So चटखारे के flavor के लिए there was an animation, and you will remember कि oh my god, next time I'm in the supermarket and I want to buy noodles, and a lot of moms buy noodles क्योंकि it's instant food, right? तो नूडल्स की ब्रांडिंग के लिए ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट था कि उन्होंने एनिमेटेड वीडियोस के साथ उसको कैप्चर किया, राइट? एज आप सेरेलैक के भी देखें एड्स किस तरह, ठीक है, टमी खुश तो मम्मी खुश, एंड व्हाट डू यू सी, वो नेस्ले का एक आ रहा होता है, एंड there's this bowl, उस बोल में सारे vitamins और आयरन्स एंड पोटेशियम्स और हर कुछ आ रहा होता है, एंड इट जस्ट सेज सीरियल के एक बोल से ये होता है. सो there's a whole story that gets created, and the story is of the mummy bear. You know, वो जो आपको गोल्डीलॉक्स के 3 bears वाली मम्मी की स्टोरी है, उससे रिलेट करते हुए वो इस स्टोरी को लेके, आई होप सो, दैट्स व्हाट आई थिंक. सो हियर इज एन एग्जांपल ऑफ using stories
Food branding.
in food.
Perfect. Reema Khan is saying math problems always came with the stories. I remember, oh God. And I was so, always like, oh God, why do they have this long story for this little math sum? But that actually was our social linking with maths and our social experiences जो हम learn कर रहे थे उस time पे through those stories कि how to do maths when we are in social environments. So I think that was the purpose. Okay, so let's move on to our next question. How does storytelling influence our lives? As I think this question goes to you, Azra.
Okay, so what I have learned, the way storytelling has influenced our lives as human beings is, if we were to take up, like Reema just pointed out, problems in math always came with stories, right? Problems in geography, problems in physics. ये school time की मैं साथ की आपको बात बता रही हूँ. When we were studying those Bohr books, and the teachers, सबकी अपनी learning pedagogies होती हैं, right? So if we were to be doing rote learning, so rote learning में, if you recall, we would just produce for the exam and we would forget. अगर हमसे 3 महीने के बाद पूछा जाता, we will never remember it. But if those teaching pedagogies are associated with modern techniques of storytelling, हमें आज भी याद रह जाएगा, right? एक principle होता था, Archimedes principle, right? I might not remember that theorem, but I knew what that principle was about. So even a boring math or a physics theorem, I would remember because it was associated with this person called Archimedes, right? Economics में हमारे पढ़ाते थे Pareto principle. Oh, I might not remember that in economics, but there is a whole story that goes behind Pareto principle, and it says the principle of 80-20. 20% of your customers will bring 80% of revenues or sales for you. So I might not remember the 80-20 principle, but I will remember Pareto. Similarly, if I were to be taught, conditioning, behavior conditioning, right? I will not remember it. It's too much psychology, it's too much management. But the moment I know Pavlov's experiment, where he rings a bell, and every time he rings a bell and throws a meat of peas to a dog, the dog associates the ringing of bell and starts salivating. Okay, it's exactly the same with us in our lives with stories. We will not remember the exact situations. We do not remember the exact incidences, but the moment we can associate or relate a story to it, right? So whenever, December, mid-December, there is always a story which is the smallest coffins are the heaviest. It relates back to the जो आपके पेशावर के आपके APS स्कूल के साथ जो आपका इंसिडेंस हुआ, जिसके अंदर इतनी किलिंग्स हो गई, इतने बच्चे उसमें मारे गए, राइट? इट्स अ सैड स्टोरी, बट यू विल ऑलवेज रिलेट टू दैट सैड स्टोरी, राइट? 2005 आपका बहुत बड़ा अर्थक्वेक आया है पाकिस्तान में, अक्टूबर ही 8 अक्टूबर था, आई थिंक, राइट? I will always remember 8th October as that devastating earthquake, जिसकी वजह से almost 3 लाख लोग आपके dislocate हुए हैं, ठीक है? And they had to be relocated. So in history, I may not remember the date, but I remember a story that was associated with it. So how these So this is how stories influence our life. आज को अगर हम कहते हैं ना, Pakistanis have a charitable nature, Pakistanis have a giving nature, Pakistani donations करने में बहुत आगे, right? I will immediately recall कि जब earthquakes आते हैं तो कैसे donations होते हैं, जब इस तरह के storms आ जाते हैं या इस तरह के कोई अल्लाह ना करे ऐसी situation इस मुल्क में आ जाती है. COVID is an ideal example. Pandemic में the way people have come out, volunteered money, volunteered food, volunteered their time, volunteered their services. आप young बच्चों को देखें जो एक्सपो सेंटर में आपका जो बना हुआ है इस वक्त, कोविड की उसको एक फैसिलिटी को कन्वर्ट किया हुआ है. You've got so many youngsters volunteering out of that. So these are stories. मैंने एक volunteering के ऊपर एक सेशन किया था. I use the stories of youngsters to tell the Pakistani youth that you can also be mobilized to give time volunteering. सिर्फ पैसों की जरूरत नहीं है. So I use the stories of all those youngsters. ठीक है. एक बड़ी अच्छी एक entrepreneur है, बड़ी young entrepreneur है. Her name is Parishe. She runs Awami in Pakistan. It's a new brand. Parishe left her business to volunteer at the Expo Center for COVID relief. She's not frontline. She works in supply chain, but she did that. I use her story कि इतनी popular, इतनी top entrepreneur ने अपना काम छोड़ा है इस pandemic में support करने के लिए. That's how you build on and you role model, and that's how you influence other people through stories.
So right, so right. और मेरे ख्याल में स्टोरी टेलिंग एक यूनिवर्सल एलिमेंट होता है ह्यूमन एक्सपीरियंस का, जो हम यूनिवर्सली शेयर करते हैं. तो लेट्स से इफ वी हैव टू लर्न अबाउट अदर कल्चर्स विदाउट गोइंग देयर फिजिकली, वी एक्चुअली लर्न अबाउट देम थ्रू स्टोरीज. लेट्स से कि अगर मुझे टर्की के बारे में कुछ जानना है तो आई विल सी डॉक्यूमेंट्रीज, आई विल सी स्टोरीज, एंड आई विल गेट टू नो अबाउट दैट प्लेस. So it's a community act और common grounds जो होते हैं किसी जगह के, वो हमें connect करते हैं और we get to know about their values, their ethics, their beliefs and everything that's there. So through stories actually we share passion, fear, sadness, hardships, joys, and we find common grounds with other people. इसी के साथ मिस्टर सजवानी, मैं आपसे पूछना चाहूंगी कि इन योर ट्रेनिंग सेशंस एक्चुअली हाउ डू यू यूज द आर्ट ऑफ स्टोरी टेलिंग, और कैसे आप लोगों को इंगेज रखते हैं? बिकॉज आई थिंक कभी कभी बहुत ही ड्राई हो जाती हैं ट्रेनिंग सेशंस, तो इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कि लोग इंगेज रहें, इंटरेस्टेड रहें.
वजिया, सबसे पहले तो ये कि वी थिंक अबाउट ट्रेडिशनल वे ऑफ टेलिंग स्टोरीज. उसको उसका जो इसकी जो स्पिरिट है या रूह जो है वो ट्रेडिशनल वे ऑफ स्टोरी टेलिंग में है. तो हम जो है वो मतलब बच्चे हों या बड़े हों, हम कोशिश करते हैं कि ट्रेडिशनल वे को हम हाथ से ना छोड़ें, और उसी में लोग जो है वो बहुत मजे से स्टोरी सुनते हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, हमने सलाम कर लिया और सीधा एक स्टोरी की, जी हम 1876 को क्या कहते हैं उर्दू में, 1876 में जाते हैं, और उस वक्त जो है वो एक बहुत अजीम आदमी की पैदाइश हुई थी, और लोग सोचेंगे कि भाई कौन आया था उस टाइम पे, कायदे आजम मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना पैदा हुए थे. तो आप इस तरह से अगर स्टार्ट करते हैं तो लोगों की वो जो सेटलिंग डाउन जो बहुत ज्यादा टाइम लगाती है ट्रेनिंग के बिगिनिंग में, तो पीपल आई मीन फील अ बिट इजी कि जी अब तवज्जो देनी है कि कुछ आ रहा है, कुछ मजेदार चीज आ रही है. तो इस तरह जो है वो हम ट्रेडिशनल जो वे है उसमें रहें, और उसको थोड़ा और दूसरा ये कि स्टोरी एक साथ हम नहीं कहते, कोशिश ये करें कि ये तो खैर अजरा की फील्ड है और आपकी फील्ड है वजिया, लेकिन मैं इसमें ये मैंने देखा है कि स्टोरी को आप बीच में छोड़ के थोड़ी देर के लिए कहीं और चले जाएं और लोगों को सोचने का मौका दें कि क्या हुआ था उसके साथ. तो that's how they stay engaged और दूसरी मजे और एंड कनेक्टेड. फिर हम ये करते हैं कि केस स्टडीज में हम स्टोरीज को शामिल करते हैं, जिस तरह मैंने कहा कि अगर उनको केस स्टडी हमने दी हुई है तो उसमें भी स्टोरीज आ सकती हैं. फिर जिस तरह ट्रेडिशनल मेथड का मैंने बताया, सस्पेंस को बीच में छोड़ दें आपने एक स्टोरी, और लेट देम थिंक कि क्या हुआ, अब क्या हुआ, बीच में आपने एक और वाकया, ये कोई एक और स्टोरी आपने बता दी, और वो उस को अभी तक उसके जहन से निकला नहीं है, लेकिन वो साथ साथ दूसरी स्टोरी भी सुन रहा है. तो ये एक सस्पेंस का एलिमेंट जो है वो हम मेंशन, और इसमें जो है वो हम कोशिश ये करते हैं कि स्टोरीज, फॉर एग्जांपल मैंने कहा कि मूवीज, चूंकि मैं बहुत सारी मूवीज देखता हूँ, और खासतौर पे अर्तुरुल के बाद जो है वो कुछ मेरा इंटरेस्ट ज्यादा बढ़ गया है कि हम जो है वो बहुत सारी ऐसी चीजें भी देखें जो कि हमारी हिस्ट्री से हैं। तो उसमें जो है वो बड़ी मजेदार चीज होती है कि लोग आप जो है वो फिर उसको उनसे जो हम शक्ल लोग पाकिस्तान में पाए जाते हैं उस पर भी आते हैं अपने सेशंस के दौरान कि जी आपको पता है कि जी इसकी जैसा शक्ल का लड़का जो है वो आजकल जो है वो तुर्की घूम रहा है और वहां बड़ी शोहरत कमा रहा है वगैरह वगैरह। तो ये चीजें जो है ना लोगों को बहुत इंटरेस्ट करती हैं और मुमकिन है कि हम जो है वो एटलीस्ट उनको एंगेज रखने के लिए इस चीज को आप कनेक्शन स्टेब्लिश कर सकते हैं। और समरसेट मॉम की एग्जांपल तो मैंने आपको शुरू में दी कि जिस तरह उसने जो है वो ये एग्जांपल जो है वो ओनरशिप के हवाले से मुझे इससे बेहतर स्टोरी नहीं मिली आज तक। पता नहीं शायद मैं कम पढ़ता हूं, लेकिन अगर आप लोगों के जहन में भी ऐसी स्टोरीज हो तो प्लीज ऑप्शन शेयर कर लीजिएगा, बिकॉज ओनरशिप हमारे हमारे something went wrong.
हाँ,
We
I
are
think
back.
थोड़ा सा stuck
We are
हो गया.
back.
Yes, we are back.
जी जी। सो आई थिंक इसके पहले कि दोबारा शरारत करे नेटवर्क, ओवर टू यू वजिया।
All right, perfect. It has been a wonderful show और हम टाइम हमारा ऊपर हो गया and we didn't even realize. It's wonderful talking about this topic. और ये बहुत सारी हमारी childhood memories भी actually it brought back. So I think we will go for our ending notes. So let's start with Mr. Sajwani, your ending notes on the topic.
I think I haven't had such a wonderful show during last 1 year. I must give you the credit, Wajiha, for at least identifying this and the inclusion of Azra. I mean, what a great speaker, what a great scholar, and what a great human being. I must say that we are meeting for the first time, but amazingly impressed, and I think we should keep in touch. And इतना बेहतरीन टॉपिक सेलेक्ट करने के लिए हैट्स ऑफ टू यू वजिया।
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
I have written an article on that, but उस आर्टिकल से बहुत ज्यादा मजा आया और खास तौर पे जो इल्म के मोती अजरा की तरफ से आए हैं। I mean, thank you.
That's her field. That's her field. Truly.
नहीं, amazing.
Actually, यही इस पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू इस प्रोग्राम का यही था कि हम लोग 3 डिफरेंट फील्ड के लोग बैठे हैं और बताएं कि हमारी अपनी फील्ड्स के अंदर एक्चुअली कैसे हम स्टोरी टेलिंग यूज कर सकते हैं। आप बात कर सकते हैं लीडरशिप के बारे में, लीडर्स can be good storytellers as well and they can influence people, and same goes with Azra. Ke Azra to obviously I read her blogs, I read her stories, I read what she writes, so I know she masters the skill. So it is a pleasure to have you both here. So Azra, aapki taraf aaya mera question.
Wajiha, this was so good. It was so spontaneous that you came up with this topic. And I know 2 महीने पहले तुमने मुझे कहा था ना, and I jumped on it. I said, yes, let's do it. And when you told me that we're also getting Sajwani sahab, I got really excited क्योंकि एक different perspective आपको पता लगता है ना इसके ऊपर, right? So my ending note here is that stories actually are wheels of emotions. Okay, that's what I like to say, right? Sorrow, grief, sadness, happiness, all emotions. And the reason we call it as a wheel is because it's got to be rolling. It's got to go on and on and on. Kahin rukta nahi hai. And that is the beauty of storytelling. It should not stop. Generations se chalti chali aa rahi hai. Storytelling is as old as the human life itself. So I'm happy to be a part of here. There was so much exchange, and I'm so happy to see itne interesting comments logon ke aa rahe hain. I'm really excited. I'm really happy that I was here. I'm very thankful, Sajwani Saab, for you being here and being with me and talking about your experiences. Wajiha, for coming up with such an amazing. See, so I'm right now out of the box. बिल्कुल सही है तुम्हारे लिए.
Thank you. नहीं, ये बिल्कुल, और मैं मिस्टर सजवानी को जरूर ये कहना चाहूंगी कि whenever कोई भी टाइम हो, I reach him out कि भाई ये वाला टॉपिक और मुझे आपके साथ करना है. He never says no. And he is always available. और ये इनका बहुत ही kind और generous nature है कि he's always there. One message and he's asked me क्या date होगी, and he always agrees, and it is a pleasure having him on the show.
Thank you,
और
Wajiha.
इसके साथ हम ख़त्म करना चाहेंगे अपने शो को, और मेरा लास्ट एंडिंग नोट ये होगा कि आई रेड दिस समवेयर, रॉबर्ट मकी सेड स्टोरी टेलिंग इज द मोस्ट पावरफुल वे टू पुट आइडियाज इनटू द वर्ल्ड. And I agree that storytelling is a powerful tool, but what matters the most is how you write the story of your life. So make your story a wonderful and inspiring one. That's from Wajiha, the life coach. So enjoy your journey of life, make a good story of your life, and write your story by yourself. Don't give other people the pen to write your story. You write your story. All right. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Allah Hafiz, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Khuda Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz.